Dear friends, this video talk marks a significant point in what has been for me something of a 12-year journey. But first, let me say something about the rules of engagement, if you will, for the talks and discussion afternoons. The purpose of the talks is to provide information, so to inform, or to prompt discussion, or both. Some of the discussion afternoons will be preceded by the publication of a talk via a link from the Bacon 2020 programme webpage, and some talks will not be linked in this way to discussion afternoons, and some discussion afternoons are not yet linked to a talk, and perhaps some discussion items might grow from one afternoon and merit particular discussion on another date. So all of this is a bit live and will change. In regard to the talks to prompt discussion, these will inevitably include supposition and the personal opinion of the speaker. The speaker may have reached a particular opinion or conclusion without access to all the facts, or it might be that the opinions are presented for which there are no right and wrong answers. Indeed, the speaker may present an opinion or thought process for which he or she does not yet have a solid view, but is presenting the view as a starting point for that discussion for all those assembled. So let's play through the discussion without prejudice and with mutual respect. We are an unusual collection of individuals with expertise spanning the entire university of human knowledge. So it's not to be wondered at if some of us have rather large knowledge gaps. This will even be the case with some of the speakers, me for example. The fear of showing one's ignorance is an unfortunate thing. If it causes reticence, if it means that important questions are not stated or asked, then the spirit of conference, which is what these discussion afternoons are supposed to be, that spirit is not manifest. And the outcomes of the meeting of minds from the conference will be reduced, will be lesser because of that. So I say again, listen to each other with respect and do not fear to speak. There will be no stupid questions. So treat it in that respect. Of course, I want to introduce this Bacon 2020 series of online talks and discussion afternoons by saying something about Bacon himself. He is, after all, the inspiration and example which has propelled me towards organising this. I also want to come rather quickly to the point to pick out three particular strands of thought that I want to touch on today, and I hope we will explore more fully in the future talks and discussion afternoons. And these are science and how we do science in the broadest possible interpretation, science futures and what the imperatives should be for us with our 2020 year perspective, and thirdly, science, outreach, education and influence. And please note, when I say science here, I mean it in the fullest sense. I mean to be inclusive of technology, engineering, medicine, mathematics, STEM, S-T-E-M, and STEM, S-T-E-M-M, or any future rearrangement of those letters indicating words that are actually fundamentally connected to science, or part of science, and perhaps really ought to be included in science. And this modern definition of science by splitting out all the subsets and leaving a poor skeleton behind. And the constant need for an apology and saying STEM and being oh so very careful to be seen to include everything. This leaves the language weaker, in my view. And as I'll spell out later, I think it reduces our ability to actually do science. Now, a very brief introduction of Bacon the man. Francis Bacon was born in 1561, the youngest son of Sir Nicholas Bacon, who was at that time, and until his death, the Lord Keeper of the Great Seal to Queen Elizabeth I. and he was the son of Nicholas Bacon's second wife, Anne Cook, who was a linguist and a scholar of some note in her own right. Francis had 6 half-siblings, the eldest of whom was about 20 years his senior. And he had one full brother, Anthony, who was a couple of years older and with whom he grew up and was educated. Clearly, he was born into an intellectual family and had the benefit of a good education, and presumably would have been, from a young age, very well aware of the politics of his day and the role his father played in influencing court. Notwithstanding his advantages, he was the youngest son of a younger son. He did not have the benefit of great wealth and influence. Despite his desire to devote his life to the study of sciences, he needed to earn a living, and his early career was in law and as an MP. And he reached the top of his career only through hard work, wisdom, and against adversity. Eventually, in 1618, being created Lord Verulam and succeeding to the position of Lord Chancellor under King James I. Shortly after his 60th birthday in January 1621, he was made Viscount St Alban. It was after that he was accused of corruption, disgraced and excluded from public office. While he may have been guilty to some degree, whether he deserved this is doubtful. The jealousy, backstabbing and self-serving preservation of the status quo of his fellow parliamentarians is probably key to understanding this. The fact that his career ended in disgrace might also have had something to do with the lasting under-recognition of the significance of his work. Bacon must have had a prodigious work ethic, as during this time he worked continuously to promote the need for significant investment in science development. The Novum Organum, a new methodology for science discovery, although published in 1620, clearly had its roots in earlier endeavours, and in the introductory text, Bacon is rather apologetic that he had insufficient time to be as thorough in the exposition as he would have liked. Using a process he describes as induction, Bacon extends the older method of science, of observation and classification. In this process, he suggests a listing of common causes and a search for similarities of effects, then followed by a rigorous experimentation or demonstration in order to validate the connection between the two. Some of you may be familiar with Ernest Rutherford's definition. All science is either physics or stamp collecting. That which is not measurable is not science. That which is not physics is stamp collecting. Well, what Bacon does in the Novum Organum is to take an approach to science which goes beyond observation and classification, stamp collecting, if you will, to theory development, test and validation. By Rutherford's definition, Bacon was therefore a physicist. If we can agree that Bacon was the first to construct science in this way, that the Novum Organum is the distinctive step, then perhaps he deserves to be called the first physicist. We can go a little further. Bacon recognises 3 sides to science. That is, the science I call physics. I can't pin this wholly on Bacon because the germ of it is scattered in various places in the Novum Organum, but is definitely there to be seen. But as this is the way I see physics, then perhaps I'm projecting my views onto his. Anyhow, let me spell it out. The 3 pillars are 1, mathematics, or to me, the tool sets of physics. Number 2, for Bacon, it would be astronomy. For me, it's more valuing precise observation and that there are phenomena that can be observed. And 3, mechanics for Bacon. And for me, the means of producing a beneficial outcome or product, which you might call engineering. So for emphasis, I repeat, the Novum Organum and the process and experimental procedures described therein is the first documented physics activity, as distinct from stamp collecting science. That's why I see that Bacon's Novum Organum is transformational, and why 400 years on, it's time to see this in that context. There are some who take the view that perhaps after a long period of time, it matters very little who is remembered for a particular discovery, and that is far more important to recognise that the discovery became known, that the value is in the discovery and the correct use of the discovery. Maybe I could accept that point of view, at least up to a point, but for one important fact. Physics has lost its way. That's a contentious statement, isn't it? Yes. Here we are in 2020 with 400 years of great physics advances behind us. So who am I? A relative nobody. By today's definition, I don't even work in physics. My research is into the strength and life of materials. So who am I to say that physics has lost its way? First, let me define my meaning. I compare it against the Novum Organum, but not the Novum Organum of 1620, but the Novum Organum as it should be now and should have been developed down through these 400 years. The fundamental basis is the same, but new thinking and discovery should have extended it. For example, there are significant developments in mathematics, computers, computational methods, the capability of instrumentation for observation, and the measurement and scope of phenomena that can now be measured and observed. So from the three pillars, we can see that the tool sets and the observables have been massively increased. And what about the means of application? The applications are really the embodiment of wealth invested in humanity through Bacon's second imperative for the relief of man's estate. So how well do we measure up? Have we really actually developed the means of application in the fullest possible sense? We've done engineering, oh yes, we've got engineering advances, but have we developed the means of application in the fullest possible sense? Let me illustrate this rather differently. Bacon's New Atlantis was published posthumously and is clearly somewhat of a patchwork of half-completed and rushed work. It is, however, a very early, perhaps the first, example of a science fiction novel. Right at the end, there is a wish list of desirable products of science discovery, some of which have been attained. Perhaps I'm being unrealistic or unreasonable in thinking we could have done better. But even if we had discovered everything that could have been within our powers to discover, how well has it been distributed? For Bacon, man's estate was all of humanity. Not just the powerful, the wealthy and the influential, and not just those dwelling in the developed world. And even further, it's my view that if he were here now, then it wouldn't be man's estate, but the global estate, that what we are able to influence becomes our duty to manage. So the whole globe and everything in it. Everyone knows the adage that a three-legged stool remains stable even if the legs are slightly different lengths. But if the legs are of wildly differing lengths, the stool becomes unusable. Because the Novum Organum has not been actively nurtured and developed, the application pillar of physics has not been developed in proportion with the other two. Second, the very principles of the Novum Organum have been neglected. There are those of the very highest distinction in physics today whose work would not pass scrutiny through the lens of the Novum Organum. Sabine Hossenfelder, who does not reference the Novum Organum and perhaps is unaware of it, picks up this theme in her book, Lost in Math. She questions the scientific validity of work undertaken at taxpayers' expense, chasing the big physics questions on the basis of unjustifiably complex mathematical models. Though critical, she never actually denounces the approach, presumably because it is through this avenue of science that she makes her living. The Royal Society, incidentally founded by a group of scientists who were following Bacon's teachings, has a motto, nullius in verba, which they translate as take no one's word for it. In other words, validate your theory by proof. At what point are extreme costs of proof to be justified? A rose by any other name would smell as sweet, by Shakespeare. A sufficiently complicated mathematical construction can model anything, the name of the rose. The real test is in the sweetness. How useful and how usable is the model, and how well does it predict reality? This is Occam's razor, the law of parsimony, or Einstein's everything should be made as simple as possible, but no simpler. It is also the very fundamental essence of the Novum Organum. Third, and now this becomes personal, as already alluded to, Bacon had two imperatives. The first concerned the knowledge discovery, and the second, the application. In modern times, we tend to describe the first as science or physics, and the second as engineering or applied physics. The second is considered to be the poor relation, the worthy work for those of lesser intellect. There is a reluctance to even consider engineers to be scientists, and the gulf between the two is widening. We see plenty of high-profile physicists pontificating on the media about the challenges that we face right now, on climate change, third world poverty, energy needs, managing global resources of food and water for an expanding population, man-made ecological disasters and natural ecological disasters, failure to achieve world peace, and even COVID-19 and the perils of our own overcrowded society. But many and most of the problems here, we hope, will be solved by people whose educational experience is in engineering or applied science. We are teaching young people to be scientists or engineers. We are not teaching young people to become scientists and engineers. We are teaching them that the elite will become scientists or physicists, and that the engineering pathways are for the less able. We reinforce that through the pay packet. We reinforce that through the media attention and the enduring image of the oily rag and a myriad of other triggers. We hear plenty about the challenges and the dire consequences. We hear plenty about the need to do outreach, to encourage young people to study science or engineering. All the science and engineering institutions are singing off this same hymn sheet. We also hear plenty of disparaging comments about the youth of today, or government tactics for dealing with youth unemployment, the rising costs of university education for all, and the problem of Mickey Mouse degree subjects. Where's the real motivation? Where's the real motivation in the post-woke 2020 culture? Oh yes, and let's not forget that a culture is a disease grown in a petri dish to allow it to be studied. The youth are our future. They're not a problem to be solved. They should be respected. So in Bacon's own words, and of his own time, again there is a great and powerful cause why the sciences have made but little progress, which is this. It is not possible to run a course aright when the goal itself has not been rightly placed. Isn't it about time to reinstate some values and fix the goals aright? With the right goals and values, the right educations will be planned, the right rewards will follow, and young people will step up to the challenges ahead. We need visionary leadership, Leadership that's not afraid to do the right thing and has its eye firmly on the future good. And if we are to learn from the example of the latter part of Bacon's life, we need to protect and nurture the development of society while protecting it from the harm of those who would hold it back for self-serving reasons.